If you'll turn to John, not 1 John, but John. Chapter 2. Starting in verse 1, we're probably all very familiar with the first miracle that Jesus did. And when he started his ministry with his disciples, he turned the water into wine. Let's read that, starting in verse 1 of John 2. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it came from, though the servants who had drawn water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. If we look at that one instance there, can we put ourselves in that position of the servants? Now they've run out of wine. This is a pretty big deal at a wedding. They've run out of wine. Jesus' mother comes, says, "They're out. Can you do something?" And he tells her, "It's not my time yet." But what does she say? Do whatever he says. What does Jesus say to us today? Do whatever I say. Okay, now these servants, there's water jugs there. They hold from 20 to 30 gallons of water. There's 6 of them. And they're made out of stone. They'll hold 20 to 30 gallons. So if you figure, okay, 8 pounds to the gallon is what water is. That's 160 pounds. Is that correct? 8 pounds times 20? 160 pounds. This is the lightest ones. 160 pounds, and they're made out of stone. These are not 5-gallon buckets. These are heavy. Now these servants have no clue what he's planning on doing. They're just gathering the water, and they're thinking, man, this is not going to be good. Because all we're doing is putting water in these jugs. These jugs was used for ceremonial washing. These weren't even the old wine skins or anything. This is just a common, to us, a 5-gallon bucket, only bigger. And they're filling it with water. Fill them jars and fill them to the brim. Not just part of the way. Fill them to the brim. Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. That's the kicker right there. How many of us would do that? We know what's in the jars. And you want a lowly servant to take some to the master of the banquet. Would we do that? I mean, really think about it. This could be a termination of my job here if I come and, hey, we're out of wine, and I give him a glass of water. But that's what he asked. And what do? As his mother said, do whatever he tells you to do. So they do. They pull the water out of the jug. They take it to the master. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He tasted it, and they're ready to get the rebuke that's due them. I'm serving him water. But what was his reaction? This is the best stuff I ever had. Normally, you serve the best first. Then when everybody's had a little too much, then you serve the other that's, it can be maybe too old. Maybe on the point of maybe turn into vinegar or something. But it doesn't really matter because, they're not going to notice. But he's saying you did it the opposite. You're bringing the best out at the end. How is that for us? When we put ourselves in this position, what do you think them servants felt like when he made the announcement to the crowd, hey, this is way better than the first? They were feeling pretty good, weren't they? But when they handed him the cup, what do you think was going through their mind? This is not going to be good. How many times does he put us in these situations in our life when we think, this is just not working out. This has no good outcome. In my mind, this is not going to work. Have we been there? When we are trying to do Jesus' will and we're striving to do our best, and we come up against something and we think, in our minds, there is no way. There is no way any good can come from this. And yet, what happens? He shows us much more than we ever expected. Much more. He expects us to do just what his mother said. Do whatever I tell you. Even if it doesn't sound like what you want to hear. Do whatever I tell you. I know on Sunday morning we've been talking about the adversities that we go through and the struggles, and we just don't understand why. But I think if we read this, it helps us to understand that God wants the very best for us as his children. Doesn't a father want the very best for his kids? Anybody that's raised kids, that's what you want. You want them to have the very best. But the kids don't always understand what's going on, do they? They think, this is not right. This is not, you don't know what you're talking about. But unlike physical fathers here on earth that make mistakes, occasionally, God never does make a mistake. He never makes a mistake. He knows exactly what he wants for his children. And he knows how they're going to react to it. And he's hoping that we will choose the proper avenues so that we can follow his will. It could have been very easy for these servants to say, there's no way I'm doing this. I don't know who you are. You come in as a guest and then you tell us to put water in these. No, I'm not going to do that. We'll have to send somebody to the next village or maybe over to the neighbor's house. Maybe they've got a little extra wine or something for this wedding, but we're not doing this. We're not going to be made a fool of. I think sometimes we have those thoughts go through our mind. I don't want to be made a fool of. But yet, if we follow his words, it's guaranteed to work out, even if it looks impossible. Something to think about as we go throughout the rest of this week. We are definitely going to be bombarded by Satan. It tells us we are. He's going around like a roaring lion. And if he can possibly get us to doubt God's plan, to doubt that He is actually going to take care of us in no matter what situation we're in, even if it looks like it's not going to work. He's still going to be there. As long as we keep our eyes and our ears open for whatever He wants us to do, it will always work out. Always. If there's anyone here that needs